Welcome. I am a lay Shin Buddhist who nevertheless maintains an interest in the broader realm of Pure Land and Mahayana Buddhist teachings. My YouTube channel is called Akala Akala, that is A-C-A-L-A, A-C-A-L-A. In these podcasts, I make a non-scholarly, humble, and sometimes bumbling attempt to explore a particular topic or question related to the wonderful Buddha Dharma. I hope you find them to be of interest. With that said, let us begin. So, I want to give a little more explanation as to why, in spite of the fact that I'm a Shin Buddhist, I upload on my Akala Akala YouTube channel teachings from various traditions within Buddhism. Why do I do this? It's in contradiction to what many Shin Buddhists not only would not recommend, but would vigorously argue against me doing. And it's certainly contrary to what somebody like Renyo would recommend or sanction. Well, the reason I do it has to do with Chapter 2 of the Lotus Sutra, as well as the Sutra of Innumerable Meanings. These two sutras, within the context of the threefold Lotus Sutra, talk about the Buddha's use of expedient means, or skillful means, and these aren't the only sutras within Mahayana Buddhism where this concept is discussed. The idea is that the Buddha teaches in ways that fit the spiritual needs of particular individuals or groups of individuals. Because each person, if they really work to try to explain or articulate what their belief system is, we would find subtle differences between them, even if all of them at a certain religious ceremony recited a certain creed that reflected a common belief system. Now, we do have a common belief system within Shin Buddhism. We have an orthodox doctrine, and that doctrine gives me great satisfaction, and I believe in that profession of faith of the kind that Reverend Kenryu Tsuji articulates in his profession of faith. But I can also step outside of that persona, if you will, and in the context of my urge, my motivation to promulgate Buddhism, to turn the great Dharma wheel, I can step outside of my Shin Buddhist persona and share teachings that are not precisely within that tradition. So maybe some will, no doubt some will call me a heretic. Maybe I'm Mara, who knows? And like Shinran said, maybe I'm heading for hell no matter what I do. But anyway, this is what I am moved to do. And in order maybe to give you a direct line on the scripture, the sutra, which teaches this approach, let me just recite one paragraph from the second chapter of the Lotus Sutra. And in the Weatherhill Kosai edition, which is the one that I studied most intensively back in the day when I first got turned on to Buddhism, the translation there is not skillful means or expedient means, but tactfulness. So the Buddha, just to set the scene, has just finished preaching the Sutra of Innumerable Meanings, which again I would strongly encourage, if you've never been exposed to it, to get a copy of that. It's either in the Weatherhill Kosai edition or in the Gene Reeves translation of the Threefold Lotus Sutra. Again, the Innumerable Meanings Sutra being the first of the three. But again, he's just finished preaching that, and he's got this ray that he sends out from his forehead, and just people are amazed because in the light of this ray, people, the assembly, the crowd, the bhikshus, the bhikshunis, the upsakas, upsikas, in other words, the monks, the lay people, they can see all these Buddha lands. They can see all these bodhisattvas functioning in these various bodhisattva practices. And again, they are quite amazed. So sort of representing this assembly, Maitreya, who is considered to be the bodhisattva who is predicted to be the next Buddha in this Saha world, namely on our earth, Maitreya Bodhisattva, he decides to ask Manjushri. Manjushri Bodhisattva represents infinite wisdom, and he's kind of a senior guy. And he's been around. He's been around for many past lives, frankly, many past Buddhas. And he has seen a Buddha in the past give forth this ray of light and create this kind of miracle of vision, whereby all the assembly can see these different Buddha lands and these different bodhisattva practices. So anyhow, Maitreya asks Manjushri, he says, what's the story here? Please, can you explain to us what is going on? And let me just give the preface to the little paragraph on tactfulness by saying what Manjushri said. He said, "Whenever from any of the former Buddhas I have seen this auspicious sign, after emitting such a ray, they have thereupon preached the great law. Because of this, know ye that now the Buddha, having displayed this ray in like manner, intends to cause all creatures to hear and know the law which all the worlds will find hard to believe. This is why he displays this auspicious sign. Therefore, I consider that the present Tathagata will preach the great vehicle sutra called the Lotus Flower of the Wonderful Law, by which bodhisattvas are instructed and which the Buddhas watch over and keep in mind. The truth of the reality of all existence. Now the Buddha sends forth a ray to help reveal the truth of reality. Be aware, all of you. Fold your hands and with all your mind await. The Buddha will pour the rain of the law to satisfy those who seek the way." So this is the preamble in terms of Manjushri's explanation. And by the way, the word Tathagata, that is another word for Buddha, which means one thus come or one thus gone. And so he's predicting that the Buddha is going to preach the Lotus Sutra. So at that time, the world-honored one, he rose quietly and clearly from contemplation, and he addressed Sariputra. Now, Sariputra is not a bodhisattva. He's a bhikshu. He's a monk. But you recall from the previous explanation by Manjushri is that the Lotus Sutra is the scripture by which bodhisattvas are instructed. What you have to see here is that even though the Buddha is addressing Sariputra as a Shravaka or a hearer, in other words, a monk who attempts to eliminate attachments in order to ultimately experience nirvana, he's addressing Sariputra because the whole thrust of the scripture or the sutra is to orient these so-called Shravakas or monks to the path of the bodhisattva. That's the whole idea. And in order to do that, he's going to do some teaching about how bodhisattvas and Buddhas function. And the way they function is by teaching in terms of tactful means. Okay. So he addresses Sariputra and he says, "The wisdom of Buddhas is very profound and infinite. The Buddhas have been in fellowship with countless 100,000 myriad kotis of Buddhas, perfectly practicing the infinite law of all Buddhas." So here you see, he's creating sort of a cosmic picture. In other words, we have this sort of parochial sense of ourselves on this earth, and we have a historical Buddha who, Sakyamuni was an actual prince who became a Buddha and gave wonderful teachings in terms of the Four Noble Truths, the Eightfold Path, etc. But here we're in a whole different sort of cosmology, if you will. And even though this Buddha in the Lotus Sutra is portrayed as Sakyamuni, he's not the Nirmanakaya or the form body form of the Buddha. He's the Sambhogakaya. He's the bliss body. He's a cosmic Buddha. And he's been in fellowship with all these other Buddhas. So he says, "Sariputra, ever since I became a Buddha, with various reasonings and various parables, I have widely discoursed and taught, and by countless tactful methods have led living beings, causing them to leave all attachments. Sariputra, the Tathagata is able to discriminate everything, preach the laws skillfully, use gentle words, and cheer the hearts of all. Sariputra, essentially speaking, the Buddha has altogether fulfilled the infinite, boundless, unprecedented law. Of yore I followed countless Buddhas, and perfectly trod the right ways of the profound and wonderful law. This law is inexpressible. It is beyond the realm of terms. Among all other living beings, none can apprehend it, except the bodhisattvas who are firm in the power of faith." So what is he saying here? First off, he's saying any particular doctrine, any religious scripture or system is provisional. And the actual truth of reality cannot be expressed in words. Why? Because words by definition are dualistic. Thinking is by definition dualistic. But, the Buddha realizes that you have to use words to communicate and to teach living beings. And you have to use those words within a framework that particular individuals can relate to and understand. And that's why he uses gentle words to cheer the hearts of all, and ultimately uses various reasonings and parables in order to get it across to human beings that, that they're all destined to become Buddhas. Eventually, that's the bottom line within the sutra, is that all sentient beings, all human beings certainly, are destined to become Buddhas. We all have the Buddha nature. And so it's a question of what teachings can help a particular individual make movement along that path toward Buddhahood, which is, in essence, the Bodhisattva path. Now, again, within Mahayana Buddhism, you've got the Bodhisattva path, which is the path of sages, so to speak. But in the Lotus Sutra, the groundwork is laid for the notion that it's not just the path of sages that's available to sentient beings, that there is an easy path, that there is a Buddha who exists eternally. Earlier, Manjushri said that what the Buddhas are basically teaching in the Lotus Sutra is the truth of the reality of all existence. So again, there is a sense in which the Buddha is eternal, which is also covered explicitly in this sutra in the 16th chapter. And of course, that Buddha is a source of comfort and a source of salvation, frankly, for those of us who are limited in our capabilities and don't have a chance, really, in spite of any heroic efforts we might make to accomplish Buddhahood by virtue of any practices along the path of sages. And of course, that's how I view myself. Even though I can share some of these various teachings of different aspects of the Buddhist tradition within my YouTube channel, I'm basically echoing wisdom that comes from the sutras and from the commentaries by the masters. And so while on the one hand, I can appreciate the profundity of such teachings, any attempt by me to exercise the practices necessary to fulfill them through that difficult path is futile. And it's on that basis that I am extremely grateful for the Sukhavati Sutras, which give in more detail the tactful method or expedient method that the Buddha uses for those of us facing such limitations. Namo Mita Boots. With that, I will sign off by reciting the Nembutsu in gratitude for being embraced and accepted just as I am by Amida Buddha, never, never to be abandoned. Namo Mita Boots, Namo Mita Boots, Namo Mita Boots.